All right, so as we're kind of all coming in here, folks, we're just kind of trying to get some ideas up on this Jamboard here. So I'm actually going to stop presenting here. You should be able to install Miro. It's the top right corner. Mark, you can share your screen there so everybody can see that. And we're just looking at putting up some different things that we think make coaches great, right? Make them great leaders, make them great coaches, help them to build great culture. Clarity, competence. Yeah, Ryan, we expected that. So you're just going to get to chime in there. If you drop in the chat, Mackenzie will drop in a post-it for you. So someone put shows up early, environment, magnetic as a coach. Likable. Listener. Competitive.
Did something.
Highest standards. Think about when you go in and if you were to observe their practice, maybe what's something they do there. Or that they don't do. So Austin's probably blocked as well too. I think the way that they gave feedback to athletes was constant, consistent. Fantastic. Visionary. Joy. Joy. Instantly think of like Steve Kerr right there. Smile. Brought high and positive energy from Anthony there to every practice and game. Truth teller. Asks questions. Consistency. And that's a big one. Not being consistent in how they show up, their standards. That's kind of an interesting one too. I think there's a lot of athletes actually trying to give coaches grace there on that I've seen, but still a challenge for sure. Let's think here. We've got other consistent and confident. Touches. Lots of touches, physical touches. Preparation. Always put organized. I was going to put preparedness. There we go. Someone's got preparedness. Fantastic. What would you add? When you think about best coaches you've ever seen or worked with, Ray, what would you add to this?
Well, I put grounded. Some of the best coaches I could think of they were just grounded. They weren't dwelling on the past. They weren't telling us what the future was going to look like. They were in the moment. They coached in the moment with what was going on. So that way, when a storm did come and we had some adversity, we weren't blown off course very easily. Bill Dickerson, he always just stayed grounded. He was right there in the moment, just wanting us to enjoy everything that was going on or take on the challenge that was right there, that was immediately in front of us. So
I think about that presence, just being fully present too with it. That's great. Mark, will you capture that in a screenshot for us here? And I'm going to jump over back here. We're going to kind of talk about what we're going to kind of get into today. So all those amazing things that we were talking about there, that we see in the super coach is like kind of think about, like if we could design and create the super coach, maybe not hire for it, but if we could build that super coach, what would it look like? And it's not, we've done this. I've done the post-it note activity. Like think of the greatest coach that you've ever had and what were the 3 qualities about them? And if you've done that activity, the greatest coach you ever had is oftentimes they're much more in the relational soft skills than the technical, tactical aspects of our sport, right? So if you have never done that, it's a great one to do with your coaches. So ask them that question. What greatest coach ever? What were their 3 qualities? 3 things you remember about them the most. Get them to put it on sticky notes and then have them all the ones that are, soft skills, relationship based, put them on one side of the room, and on the other side, put the ones that are more on the, competencies of their sport, sport specific. When you have them do that, 90+% of the Post-it stickies are going to be on the left side, right? They're all much more relational. And yet what we know is that, like, great coaches, there is a level of competency. They know their craft. They are very growth oriented. They're trying to be on the cutting edge of their sport, right? They're not just seeking growth in relationships, but they're seeking, they want to be an effective coach, not just an effective leader. So that's a little bit like what we're kind of trying to try to capture today in our conversation. So of all the things that we had up there, I have like two questions, which for everybody is, how are we currently developing those things, and how are we evaluating those things as an administrator? The preparedness, the groundedness, right? The organization, right? At the end of the day, we're not going to have a lot of super coaches come in that are really, really good at all those types of things into our program. Or we're going to come into become an athletic director at places where there are going to be coaches there have been there 15, 20 years, and they're still going to be on that journey. And so today's conversation for all of us, and we're going to go into breakout rooms here in 2 minutes, is going to be unpacking some scenarios and thinking about what are ways that we can meet our coaches on their journey to help them to develop and equip them with these tools. How do we develop these skills, these capacities as a leader? How do we give them the strategies, the tools for them to be effective, so that we then can evaluate and hold them to those standards? Is such a critical piece of that. So that's what we're going to get into today. Mackenzie, are we good for breakout rooms?
Yep.
Okay, so everyone's been assigned a breakout room. There's one group that will not go to a breakout room. That's going to be Nate's group. Everybody else, you're going to be sent to a breakout room. And your facilitator, which are Mackenzie, Claire, Tyler, Mark, Angel, and Nate, part of the TOC team here, they're going to walk you through a case study here. We have 6 of them, so we have 6 groups. And the idea is that you're going to go in there, you're going to spend 1 or 2 minutes reading the case study, and then the facilitator will walk you through the question. What we want here today, folks, is we want participation. We want to hear your ideas. We want to hear what's resonating with all of you, right? You all are in it. You're in the trenches. And so what we found so valuable, and we typically have around 10 to 12 of our TOC coach athletic directors in these calls here, and we've opened this one up for more people today. But we have found this to be such a rich environment for us to facilitate, to bring athletic directors together. Like, we've all been learning from each other. So that's the goal of today. So we just hope that everybody has their video on, fully engaged, participating and sharing, and then listening. All right, Mackenzie, are you ready for breakouts?
Shuffle, clear, open rooms. All right, here we go, everyone.
There we go. We'll be there for about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll set up a timer for 15 minutes there.
JP, can we just do we press any buttons to come back, or will there be a master button and we just get yanked back?
I will push the master button
Okay.
to send everybody back. So,
Cool.
All right.
Sweet.
Enjoy the conversations, folks. Fantastic. All right. And I'm going to pin Nate and take myself off here.
All right, welcome everybody. As JP said, we'll kind of spend a little bit of time here, 15, 20 minutes or so, just talking through this specific scenario. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably experienced a coach like this or been on a staff with a coach like this at some point. So I'm going to read the scenario here for Coach Bill, who has been at the school for 20 years. He wins games and is respected by the board, but he views new department-wide leadership initiatives as soft. He is the silent veteran in staff meetings, refusing to share failures or participate in group discussions. So the questions that we want to kick around a little bit here, and we're going to try to give everybody an opportunity to share a little bit of their perspective. Number one, how do we build a bridge between the way we've always done it, the coach that has a methodology that maybe has been successful, but the evolving needs of today's athletes without making the veteran feel like their legacy is being devalued? And as JP talked about, thinking about how do you develop coaches into that area, how do we evaluate that, what types of education, training, or observational opportunities might help a veteran coach like Bill see the value in evolving their leadership style without feeling like they are losing their identity. So I might just open this up for anybody that just has something that's emerging for them, maybe to share either an experience or kind of how you maybe have dealt with something like this before or seen this handled before. And again, we'll try to keep this to a minute or two each, so everybody has an opportunity to share once, and then we'll have a discussion from there. Anyone interested in taking a stab at this first?
Yeah, I can get things started. We had a similar situation like this a few years ago with our head football coach, who was close to retirement. He started turning in end of the year evaluations where everyone on his staff got a perfect score. He gave himself a perfect score, and was just kind of stuck in his ways. We understood we needed a change. He was also our weight room instructor, PE teacher. Just things that were working in the late 90s, early 2000s just weren't working in 2023. And so trying to find a way to get him to connect with kids in a new way was hard. Trying to get his staff to be adaptable was difficult. And I think one of the telltale signs for us was, as he was closing in on retirement, there wasn't anybody on his staff that we could point to as his successor. And so that kind of showed us that there was definitely a culture gap starting to evolve. So we had to be creative with how we didn't fire him, but we offered an opportunity for him to retire a year early, and we brought in a new coach, new staff, and addressed it that way. And I can tell you that it was very easy for our remaining coaching staff to buy into the new coach's philosophies, programs, talk of like the culture system and ways that we can connect with each other and the kids a lot better. And so for us, I don't want to call him the dinosaur, but he wanted to coach that way. Felt like that was the one true way to do it. And we just kind of, as a department, took the angle that there's no just one way to do all this. And once you start thinking that way, that's when maybe it's time that you start looking for somebody else that's more adaptable.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing there, Pete. And I'm gonna let everybody kind of have a turn here, and I'm just taking a few notes we may return back to, but thank you. Mr. Troina, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm thinking of something we do, and it's simple as communication. Something I do at the beginning of every school year is I have a coaches meeting and just get ready for the school year, things like that. But we have a very veteran staff for all sports here. Not that they think they can't do better or anything like that, but I try to bring new things to them, whether it's the communication app that we use, which is Team Reach, or other things that they can maybe see as being beneficial. And usually I use it because I'm also one of the coaches here. I use it first, so it's battle tested, if you want to call it that, and kind of share my experiences, the pros, the cons, and even bring in some of the parent input or player input to it, just to show the positives or what went well with it, to try to sell it. Like I said, it's a very veteran staff I have here, so they're used to the good old days or back in my day, and that's how things were done. And that's not the case. And we have that conversation quite a bit with a lot of different aspects of it.
I'm going to ask you one follow-up, since I've done some work with your staff.
Yep.
And I think that when you brought me up there, the conversations that we've had have seemed pretty fruitful, and a lot of those veteran coaches seem willing to engage. Is there anything that you've done to kind of foster that kind of culture with that group, or is that just sort of the nature of who they are?
I just try to be as personable as possible with them. I think my very first meeting, because I'm not young, but I'm not old compared to my veteran staff either. But I address that right away. I know I'm not the oldest guy or have the most experience, but I've been around some good coaches, and I've done this for a while now. So let's do this together. And we're one Turkey Valley team, not just Turkey Valley football or Turkey Valley basketball. So it's good for the program or for the school, not just you and your individual program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Colleen, should we just make our way around my screen here?
Perfect. That sounds great. Yeah, I think I am new to being kind of in an athletic director role. So, and I would say our staff is probably the opposite of Anthony's. We have a lot of new coaches that have just come in. We're kind of changing the script on where things are. But I think at previous places I've been at in terms of college coaching, when I was getting my master's degree, I went in with our basketball coach and did kind of a consultant role with him as a project. And it was literally terrifying because he had been at this school for, 30 plus years and was this great coach. And I went in and did kind of like a deep dive into his specific program and met with his players and met with his coaches and discussed, like what are some things that you think could be different? And of course the kids are saying, they're comparing themselves to other programs and what they have and how they've changed and adapted. And so I think it was a way for this coach to kind of see in a role. And again, for me, giving feedback is like a young, assistant coach trying to give that feedback. It was something that he really took on board and was like willing to listen and willing to adapt. So I think a lot of people just need the push to kind of see where their gaps are. And I think, like Anthony said, have it be like a personable way about doing it, right? That, you're not trying to change these people that have been there and been doing it and have been successful doing it for a long time, but it's really about going in and creating this culture of how can we all do this together and get on board with that. And so he was willing to kind of look at himself as a coach and say, okay, yeah, I have kind of taken a step back and let things slip for a few years and gone, this is the way that I've always done things. This is the way that I will continue to do things. But he was able to kind of take a hard look and say, yeah, there's definitely some things that I can update and change with that. So that was definitely a unique experience. And I think now being in a role as an athletic director, we're looking to kind of flip our culture and change things. So we're trying to get coaches on the same page with where we're going as a department and how we want to do things. And, we're running leadership stuff with our captains, but then we're trying to also get it with our coaches because we're telling our captains one thing, but then the coaches aren't leading that way. So I feel like it's trying to just get everybody on the same page, similar to what Anthony was saying, and make sure they understand and realize that it's coming from a place of like, we're trying to grow this together and we want to do this as a whole group.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Can I ask one quick follow-up to that too? I'm just curious, when you had this idea and approached this longtime veteran, what was that first conversation like in terms of how did you approach it? And maybe was he receptive or did you find some resistance there? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think because I was in my master's program and was a student, I went in a different way than I would have probably just as like a coach or an athletic director. And I was like, hey, I have this project that I'm supposed to be doing for school. And we're looking at, the whole ecosystem of programs and how they can change and how they can operate and grow from where they're at. And I just want to take a full look at the picture. And so he was like, yeah, I'd love for you to come in and do this. And I had worked with him for 4 years prior to that. So we knew each other pretty well. He would always come and meet with our recruits because he was like a legend at the school I was at. And so he would meet with our recruits and help people. So we had already developed a prior relationship. And so when I met with him, he was, open and willing to do it. I don't know if he thought he was going to get the feedback and advice that I kind of gave him. And my teacher at the time was very much so like, you're not giving feedback. Like it's not your opinion. You're giving what you're hearing from other people. Right. So it's easier to give that feedback to people when it's not you giving the feedback, I think sometimes as well, of like, well, this is what I've heard. It's like, well, this is the information that I've collected and the data that I've collected. So I think he was definitely more willing to hear what we had to say and make some adjustments.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Chelsea, how about for you?
No, it's been good listening to this. I think here at our school, we have kids or coaches that are willing to adapt. One thing we're really working on is we maybe don't have as much success in many of our sports, trying to get more on the same page. What you talked about having, we're not just good at this sport, we want to be good overall. So we're trying to get to that. And I think our coaches are, we have veterans, we have newbies, they're all willing to adjust. It's how do we get them out of their silos and get together to work in the same common goal? So right now we're still operating as a silo, but if we try to get and bring that up, coaches are more willing to work, and we have some. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I guess that's kind of why I joined this session, to come up with some ideas to help. And, we've been meeting more as a staff throughout the years, doing not just at the beginning of the year. I've done quarterly meetings with our group, and I've got one coming up at the end of the month. So I wanted to come to this to get some ideas about how we can all work together to see success at South Tama overall in all our programs, not just in certain ones. So, our veteran coaches are kind of, I don't have very many left, so they're kind of retired now, and so that's okay. So this isn't an issue necessarily that I deal with. It's more getting everybody on the same page. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you started some of those collaborative meetings, what's been the response to that? Just trying to start to initiate some of that conversation.
I think pretty good. They're really leaning on each other and talking to each other about, hey, what are you doing? Or how are you getting kids out? How are you? They're communicating really well. So I think it's coming to an agreement about how can we overall improve our entire athletic experience, not just the wrestling team or the football. And then we're starting to see some success. So how do we? I think the conversations have been good. We just need to keep growing and working together. So we're in the beginning stages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've often said that some of the best coaching clinics that coaches can go to are within their own building-wide staff, where you're collaborating on, like you said, whether it's attrition issues or it's eligibility issues or, just getting coaches to share what's worked and doesn't work sometimes can go a long way. So it's great that you're starting that process.
Can I share
Yeah,
one? Yeah. So one thing I love about this question or this challenge, it's so real for me with where I'm working with my local club here, where some people have been coaching like 30 years in the same town, is to Nate's point, is like getting people just to share, right? So like that veteran coach is there to be able to share their experience with the younger coaches. I mean, there is still things that they may have to offer. So if you just bring people in a room and you just give them an hour and a half of listening and tell them what they need to do better, that usually doesn't go well. However, two things that rules that I introduced when we had our big kickoff of the year with 100 coaches for our club. One, we started two rules. One is we're not going to say that's how we used to do that. Well, that's how we used to do it. I found that in one school I worked with was like something I'll agree was like, we're just removing that language. So if someone says that, we can like say, no, we don't talk like that. And the other one was, it's not that it's bad. It's just we're trying to find a better way. And that's something that's always helped me as a coach who thought he was very veteran and very experienced. As I used to think like, oh, people are telling me that I'm doing this wrong. It's like, no, it's just like there's a better way of doing it. So those are two themes that I just reiterate every time we get together. Hey, let's have open minds. And these are our two rules.
As we've kind of shared individually here, anything else come to mind for anyone in terms of just, oh, this is something that I, popped into my mind about how you might address this, how you might try to facilitate this a little bit more with the staff? Any other thoughts?
I think one thing that I think I heard it on the podcast, but something that you guys worked with a group of people on, I think it was the Colorado athletic director, where they had like weekly or bi-weekly or monthly meetings basically with their whole entire staff in the mornings. That's something that I feel like, again, once you get people in a room, kind of like we're all saying, that's really where it helps, right? Like these people break down their barriers because it's not just coming in and lecturing at them. So I think that's something that I've been thinking about and trying to put in and implement here and get that going. It's been, again, we have a lot of new coaches that have come in. We have people that are kind of turning over right now. So just trying to get everybody on the same page. I know last year when I came into this role, I was new to coming into high school. I was new to going into the athletic department. Like everything was brand new for me. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, wait, we recruit? And who am I recruiting? What am I doing? Like, what am I recruiting? What age? Like there was so many questions that I had. So I feel like having people that have done it prior, right? Like you can lean on these people like the Coach Bills who've been there for 20 years and have had success. And what have they done in the past? And learning from them, from the young coaches. But then also I think those older coaches can learn from them as well if you get them all in a room together. So I feel like it's hard. And I think, again, as athletic directors, we're all very cognizant of, we don't pay our coaches very much money. We ask a lot of their time, right? So to get them in more and more and more and ask more of them to do more things is challenging. And we see that, but it also really helps if there's that kind of connected piece that we can work and grow together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one thing that we've seen as we've, been doing more support with athletic departments in general is that a lot of coaches do not overlap in their regular day, especially as you have more and more coaches that are not in the school building, so it's not like they're at lunch together, they're in the hallways together as much as it used to be, maybe 15, 20 years ago, where some of those conversations might happen naturally. And so I think when athletic directors are more intentional about creating even just opportunities for connection, when you talk about having a younger staff and the challenges that come with not knowing the other coaches, or trying to learn a new community or that sort of thing. So just creating the space and a container for that to happen, oftentimes one or two good questions can lead to, a lot of positive result down the road, because maybe now the baseball coach is more comfortable going and talking to the football coach about their summer schedules, whereas before they may have just seen each other as in the way, all the time, but they didn't really have a chance to get to know each other, right? So that personable touch, which came out in a couple of our answers here, I think is really important, not just from AD to coach, but being able to facilitate some of those connections from coach to coach as well.
Something I've done too. I started in the fall. Not that it's been super successful, but a lot of our teachers don't work in the building, and we're a small district anyway. So I try not to say, "Hey, we need to meet monthly," or I try to do it twice a year, things like that. But I started almost like a public forum for just our coaching staff, and I pose out questions and I give them a chance to respond or read other people's responses, just for another way to connect. I think of the TOC dashboard that you guys have, Nate. It's kind of what I do just from a local level. And worst case scenario, I guess it becomes my open diary, and I post and they read it, and maybe they get a little bit of perspective from it, from my coaching lens or things like that. But just being the small district that we are, that's one way I've tried to an opportunity, I guess I should say, for them to kind of connect, get other people's thoughts, and worst case, maybe try to gain a little perspective if they are looking to gain some.
And sometimes things like that are just planting seeds. They may not adopt what you're doing, but it may make them think a little bit like, oh, I never considered doing captains in that way, or doing senior night like that, or something like that. So I love that idea of just sort of casting out from your experiences and reflections. And I do think there's an advantage sometimes for athletic directors that are current coaches, or certainly have been coaches, obviously, but to be able to share some things that work, and sometimes to share some struggles that maybe didn't work, right? Or things that you haven't figured out yet, and trying to outsource a little bit of conversation that way too.
Our school's too large. I'm guessing to do this, but there's a school about 20 minutes south of us that's a fourth of our size, and they do something that I really wish we could replicate. Their last week before they kick off into, like, we have a dead week before, in August, before everything kicks off, and they have a crossover night where faculty, staff will play. So like, it'll be the boys football team will play volleyball versus the boys football coaches and teaching staff. And they invite the public in. This is like their Gatorade game. They bring in cases of water, Gatorade. That's how you get admitted in. And the community really gets around it. The girls go out, the girls volleyball team will go out and play flag football, and they're coached up by the boys. And it's a way that the students and the coaches are just kind of being competitive, but also having fun with it. And it's a great community event. They do a great job publicizing it. I wish we could do it here. I just know that there's the numbers thing is a little bit different with a school of like 300-400 kids versus a school of 2,000.
Sure. No, I think it's a cool idea though. Thanks for sharing.
Any of that stuff you could change up, I think, in a routine that's just been carved into a rut,
Mm-hmm. All right, JP, the room is yours.
Good. How do we finish up there? Everybody got a chance to speak there? Awesome. All right. I will unpin here, and people are coming back. There we go. Ray, I'm glad you got an Angels room. Angel's going to be at our retreat here in the end of April. I'm not supposed to talk about the retreat when Colleen's around, because she gets really annoyed, so she can't come. Salt Lanes. Yeah, you get to go to like Australia 4 or 5 times this year. Colleen is, for those that don't know her, she is an amazing coach, an amazing human being. She's also an assistant athletic director, at a school and an assistant coach for the Australian lacrosse national team heading to the World Cup. So, and then Angel here is very good friend and amazing executive coach that has recently gotten certified and ICF certified, and then she does the executive coaching for new coaches in TOC Coach. So if you are a coach that joins TOC Coach on our premium level, or a school that purchases, you get to work with Angel on a one-to-one coaching call. So I just kind of wanted to spend a few seconds introducing everybody here that is part of the TOC team. Those of you that follow the podcast, Mackenzie is the behind the scenes. She's our editor, but she also did an amazing episode about her first year as a head varsity coach at a high school in Maryland, and they won the state championship, right? We've got, who else? We got Claire on here. Claire does a lot of stuff within our community and support operationals. And she also is big with Savvy Basketball. She's repping the Savvy Basketball gear. So all athletic directors, when you purchase a TOC coach for your school, you also get access to Savvy Basketball, which is like an amazing basketball community out there, which is also run by Mark Cassio here. Mark, for those that don't know Mark, I worked with Mark when he was a high school basketball coach at Catholic High. Then he went and worked with Angel at App State when Angel was head coach there. And then he left there, started courtside. Then he partnered up with Tyler, who runs Savvy Basketball with him, as well as that pickleball school, another school community. And so, yeah, it's been great to be with this team here to go out and serve coaches. So super excited about it. That's just a little bit about us, as people probably are wondering who we all are. I want to just share real quick a little bit. Actually, I want you all to share just kind of your takeaways. So Claire, you had the new assistant coach. What were some of the biggest takeaways you had in your group?
Yeah, top was just empowering, right? Empowering the coach that if the idea seems to be from us and we are forcing how they must coach on them, it's not going to be authentic, and there's going to be some pushback. So to go in with an open mind that there are different styles of coaching that work, that it's not necessarily a particular volume or particular words that make coaching right or wrong. There are quieter coaches that are not effective. There are louder coaches that are not effective, and vice versa. So asking questions, coming from a place of curiosity to get them to think with intention about how they're coaching, if that's creating the culture that they're looking for, and then for opportunities to grow them to fit your culture and to kind of expand their coaching lens. Having peer coaching, exposing them to the other coaches in your program, having them kind of witness some of the other practices so that they see the other styles and if they might want to adopt some of those practices, and kind of having a multi-layered approach to that growth plan of like filtering through interviews, having resources available once you get to know that coach, where they're coming from and the culture that they're trying to build, and exposing them to the standards that you are holding kind of across the board.
The whole question asking made me think about the most impactful thing that an AD has ever done for me was actually ask me a question, and it was the Joe Ehrman question. Just like, well, how do you think it feels right now for you to be coached by you? And I think Ryan Walden actually shared in our last monthly meeting there. I think Ryan, you shared how you just asked one coach, like, what's your why? Like, and then like that became the rock, like the, reminder for that coach needed. So often it's just those great questions. Fantastic. Let's go to Mackenzie, the new head coach. Put Mackenzie, you in charge of that one. So
Yeah.
You're the new head varsity coach. So yeah, what were the big takeaways that you had from that?
Yeah, we really, so this coach focusing 100% on manager tasks and 0% on leader tasks. As we know, those managerial tasks can get a little bit overwhelming for new coaches. And I think that in this first question, this discussion question here, the biggest thing was how do we get this coach to switch the perspective to what is important and urgent as far as manager tasks and what is just important and not urgent, and how we can delegate those things, but also to like what are our athletes not getting when we focus on only manager tasks. Obviously culture building is what we're trying to do here in TOC Coach and as athletic directors, and helping place value, how we can help that coach place more value on those culture tasks. And one of the things is like, well, what are we doing as athletic directors? What kind of questions are we asking them about their culture, rather than just checking in about, did they get their bus on time? Do they have, A, B, and C uniform, set up? Do they have, all these manager tasks? Are we checking in with them enough? And are we giving them the right resources to build their culture? And we talked a little bit about what kind of resources have helped coaches and how we can check in with them. And I think that's a good summary of what we kind of talked about.
I'll go back to the questions because they kind of came up for me as you were talking there. One is just a really powerful question to ask coaches is like, what's it costing you to not make the time for one-to-ones, conversations, culture time? Like, what's it costing you at the end of the day? I think everyone thinks like to not have that. Everyone thinks about what it costs to have that. Well, it costs me time, right? It costs me all, planning, right? But it's like recognizing how it's going to cost them at the end of the year. And I also think so I think that was a great, you were starting to highlight that, Mackenzie. I also think about vision. Like one of the most important things you could start with a new head coach is like, let's say first year, like best year ever. What will be true at the end of the year for you? If it was the best year ever in your first year, what would the players have experienced? What would you have experienced? Making sure that they have a vision. That's the question that often untaps that vision. And then they go work backwards from that vision. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, buses on time would be important, but it's about what else would be really important there. Yeah, we'll go over to Nate. What you got, Nate?
All right. So we discussed a little bit about the veteran coach, the coach that's got 20, 25 years of experience, has been doing the same thing forever and has had some success with that, but maybe hasn't evolved as, athletes today obviously are a little bit different than maybe what we coached 25 years ago, when that coach started. So how do you approach the silent veteran that maybe doesn't engage in some of those conversations or interested in that growth? And a few of the things, JP, that came out of our conversation, number one, just the personal connection between the athletic director and that coach. It's probably, likely that you didn't hire that person. It's probably somebody that you inherited. And so just trying to establish some rapport and a connection, maybe make some of those conversations about growth or about evaluation or about just looking at new ways of doing things, maybe a little bit more receptive if there's that personal connection. And then we also talked a lot about just creating space and a container for conversation to happen where it's not just top down. In other words, where other members of the staff, your head coach's staff can get together and talk about attrition, and talk about a summer calendar or talk about, things that are challenging in that particular district or that community, where they can share best practices. They can hopefully feel comfortable to share some of their own struggles, and really be able to, one would hope, at least sow the seeds for coaches to be able to reflect and think about what they're doing and maybe be open to new ideas that they see from some of their peers on the staff as well. So a lot of our talk came back to, the idea of the personal relationship being important and the connections among other staff members and giving them opportunities to share as being a couple ways to start, at least trying to encourage that veteran coach to grow.
And you talked about creating the space. Daniel Coyle in his new book, Flourish, he wrote the Culture Code and the Talent Code. I'm actually interviewing him for the Coaching Culture podcast tomorrow. But he has some really good things that maybe changed my mind on a few things. Well, one didn't change my mind. The first was like creating space, creating the container. I think you need to set, like, you have to be really intentional about how do we want to have this conversation. And he just talked about like simply just starting with one question. Like, and he talked about the Cleveland Guardians, the baseball team. When he started, was doing consulting work. He helped them start with just what makes a coach great. Like that was the question they started with. And they just had a whole conversation. They spent about 2 hours unpacking that. So it's sometimes just a powerful question. But the thing he actually made me change my mind on a little bit, I had kind of had a sense of though, was like in that creating that container, create a few rules for how we're going to have conversations, whether it's no BCD, no blaming, complaining, defending, right? For my local club here, I actually started 2 kind of rules for our conversation. One is that it's going to be it's not about you being bad or wrong. We're just always looking for better, because that always ties back to me as a young coach, or even like felt like I was experienced. Anytime someone told me something new, it was like, are they telling me the way that I was doing it was wrong? It's just like, no, it's just a better way of doing it. And the other thing I did was actually did some consulting with a school down in Georgia, and they actually came up with the standard in our coach conversations when we get together as a staff. We're never allowed to use the words, well, that's the way we've always done it. Like, we just remove that, right? And so I think that often addresses the veteran coach, just removing that type of language. Like, well, we've always done this way. It's like, no, we're always about doing it a better way. Overly ambitious coach, Mark.
Yeah, initially when I saw overly ambitious, I was like, oh, we got the easy one. Like, I have a coach that wants to get better and wants to learn. Well, that wasn't exactly true. So Coach Rick and ours is just very transactional, does everything in the name of like winning. And the problem, or one of the problems, is that he is winning. He wins a lot of trophies, but morale would be down because it's a very cutthroat or transactional culture. So we really came up with 5 things, and this is kind of a combination of what everybody in our group shared. JP, you said start with like one question, right? Is what you got from Dan Coyle. The question that we would ask this coach is, what if there were no trophies given out at the end of the year? What if there were no playoffs this year? What would be important for you? What would you want their experience, the players' experience, to be like? So that might just get him to reframe why he coaches and maybe bring him back to why he got into coaching, even if it was because he loved his sport. Like, somewhere along the way, I think if you stay in coaching, it's because you really value the relationships and the people. So that was number 1, is why you coach. Number 2 would be, can we connect why you coach to the mission of the school and to the values that you want to instill or that you want to see in your team? And winning can be a byproduct of those things. Instead of putting winning at the forefront, you really put winning at the end of the assembly line. And we create these systems. We develop these values and instill these values. And as a result, we're going to win. So that's number 2. Number 3, what that would do is I would redefine what success is in our program, where success isn't just about trophies. It's about who we're becoming as people, how people feel when they're being coached by you, and when they leave your program, what impact do you have on them? So number 4 would be, and John shared this was really good, is as an athletic director, be very clear in what you measure. What is important to you? Are you measuring team GPA? Are you measuring anything? Are you giving out surveys at the end of the year to parents, to players? So we give those surveys and get feedback so we can find a better way, like JP said. And then last, I think this is the hardest one for us as leaders, is the follow-up conversations after that. So if we have all of the, we have this conversation, we have this framework, are we following up with our coaches in one-on-one conversations and being proactive in their development instead of reactive, where this coach that's winning a lot of trophies has a lot of parental problems. So that's when we meet, instead of, hey, how can we meet and create systems and better processes so we have less of these issues along the way, which creates a better athlete and coach experience.
It's so easy. We get more of what we give our attention to. And so the external is going to give them a lot of attention for the win. So it's like, can we give more attention to the coaches and that coach when they're doing things the right way too? When they're living in line with the values, win or lose, right? I think this coach, let's say he loses a game he shouldn't lose, he gets upset. That's an amazing moment to go in there and to reinforce his value outside the scoreboard too. Angel, you're up.
Okay, yeah, our group, they are deeply embedded in the TOC community. So this was a pretty robust conversation. And so really it started with the duality of leadership. There's the relationship and then there's the performance, and it's not either or, it's and. And I loved how our group framed the relationship part is actually the hard part. And so when they meet with their coaches, they talk about that. Like, you're doing the hard part, which is the human part, which is meeting all these different players on their journey. And so you have to couple that with the performance, which comes from the education of standards, of why, of installation of boundaries. And so a lot of our group talked about just leaning on the education portion of it to guide our coaches to not do things like, they're going to ask their players their why, they need to understand their why, so then they can connect it. And I thought that was really great. We also talked about how this could have a ripple effect in their staffs. And so it's not only as the athletic director coaching that head coach, it's getting them to understand that their assistant coaches have to be accountable. So maybe the assistant coach understands the relationship and performance culture, but maybe the assistant coach is the people pleaser. And so how to manage those situations, which I thought was just really robust. I mean, kept going back to values, and then how do we co-create those with our team? And then how do we install those standards? So again, the relationship meets the performance. Because I think you gave me this because I was a relationship coach. I was vulnerable with my crew. I said, I know why he gave me this. And so I was really happy to unpack it with them and how they're approaching it with their coaches. And the biggest takeaway is that athletes, no matter 8, 25, we all crave accountability. And so getting that relationship coach to understand that part of that job is to, if you love them and care for them, that's accountability in action. And so that was kind of where our group landed.
And even in my work with coaches, helping them to recognize the boundaries, the accountability, and enforcement of standards is what they're craving, like absolutely craving, especially when they come from home life situations that they don't have that. Like, it is absolute game changer, but helping our coaches to see that is really, really difficult, because there's actually some internal blocks. Like, this, Angel, like, it's like, okay, I can know how to hold them accountable, but there's like, I want to be liked. I like this. I like the relational aspect. Like, we all struggle with that in some way or another. Thanks so much for that one. Tyler.
There we go. Off mute now. Yeah, this one's really easy. Me, Ryan, and Doug figured this one out very quickly. They just told me you fire this coach and move on. No, I'm playing, kind of. So we actually had some really good examples and discussion around this. Well, let me actually just throw this out to the group. If you can all just put your quick answer in the chat to this question, because I think many of us do come from a coaching background. You have a player on your team. You have a player on a team, an athlete that is the best player on that team by far. And so they've become apathetic. What do you do? Just throw one sentence in there in the chat. There's a player on a team. They're the best player on the team by far. And so they become apathetic. What do you need to do to help that player continue to grow? Throw some thoughts into the chat. All right, Ryan says work on the relationship. It's good. Find a way to challenge them more, Mackenzie. Yeah, okay, agreed. Find out why. Okay, what they care about. Challenge. Meetings. Okay, so I think keep typing. I think all these are good. And I'm just going to say, if it was my son or my daughter, I'm looking for a new team. I'm looking for a new environment. I'm looking for a place where they can get that challenge more, right? And so, for this apathetic coach, it's like, okay, how can we get that person in a different environment, right, if they go to where they're going to be challenged. Because a lot of times apathy is a product of community. It's a product of the people that you're around. If they have achieved some success, I think Ryan shared a really good story of a very successful coach that had become apathetic, and he had a standards conversation with that coach. And though that coach was successful, that coach ended up having to move on because they were unwilling to commit to growth, to change, right? And really, the finding challenge and finding people that are going to challenge you is the best way for us to challenge a coach or a player. And that's honestly what we're trying to create here with TOC Coach, with the community, is can we get every coach around like-minded or even greater-minded coaches so that it can help encourage them and challenge them out of apathy. That's what we're trying to do here. And that was what we kind of talked about. A good friend of mine by the name of Phil Beckner, who's an NBA trainer, he says this all the time. Actually, we were in the gym with Damian Lillard, and there were a number of players that were not as good as Damian Lillard in this training session. There was some pre-draft stuff that we were doing a year or two ago, and Damian Lillard, who, if you don't know, NBA All-Star, one of the best players in the world. He was embracing the difficulty and the challenge of what we were doing. And then some of the more apathetic players were rebelling against the challenge of what we were doing. And Phil said this, he said, if you have high standards, you lose the low achievers. If you have low standards, you lose the high achievers. And he just said it to the group. He said, I'm not going to lose Dame by lowering my standards right now. And then he shared with the players a little more apathetic, a little bit lazy, said, but I'm not going to lower my standards for you either. And here's what happened. The majority of those more apathetic players raised their level. The minority of those players, a couple of them, just didn't come back the next day. And so I think, that's one thing we were talking about in our group was just raise the standards. And some of them will change and some of them won't. And it will be their decision and not yours. Whether they move on or whether they choose to develop, because once they choose to develop, then we can give them a path for development. So I think that was that's what we're both trying to do here at TOC Coach, is put people in an environment around other people with high standards so they can be challenged. And then practically for the apathetic coach, I think that's something that we talk about we could apply to them as well.
I love that story. That's a good one. And I think we want to create environments, like you said there, of just the high standards. It's actually what the coaches crave. Here's the coach pathway. We think it's linear, and yet it's so multifaceted. I looked at this is what I kind of did up recently. I was like, what are all the aspects of coaching? I think we try to focus on 3 in TOC Coach, which is culture, the systems, the strategies, the team activities, the way you set standards. We also think about leadership. How do you work on your own mindset as a coach, your own well-being? How are you approaching relationships, right? Are you seeing our athletes as people? But then we also touch on the art of coaching. How do you be a more effective communicator, structure your practices more efficiently? Those are the 3 big domains. But in that, you're always trying to give coaches tools, but tools without skills, right? Then we don't know how to use the tools, right? So we have to actually have certain skills. We need to have certain capacity as a leader. A lot of we do that work. Me and Angel do that in our one-to-one coaching with as we're trying to develop a leader's capacity to be able to take new perspectives. And then we're working on obviously trying to develop character of the people that we work with. And then you start going out there and it's like, okay, how do you teach? Are you, do you know the X's and O's, right? Emotional intelligence. Are they effective organization and planning? There's so many other types of things that we could focus on, but it's really a lot. And people are on different places in the journey. And so these linear coach pathways, they just don't work for me. But what does work for me is conversations, bringing and creating community. And that's one thing that I would encourage you to do. And I'm going to throw this over to Tyler in a second, but just those case studies, create some case studies, create one case study. I'll give myself a piece of feedback. I actually should not have put 3 questions. I should have just put one question or one really simple question. Create a case study, give people one simple question, and get coaches in the breakouts and have them talk. give them 20, 25 minutes. They will love that. That'll be the best. They'll be like, that was the best staff meeting we've ever had, right? We got to talk. I get to hear people's different perspectives. So create, scenarios of a challenging athlete and, bring a bunch of young coach and an old coach together and the Gen Z coach with the, 60-year-old coach, and they're going to pour into each other. It's just so much value in these types of conversations. So I appreciate you all being a part of it. Tyler, you got anything else you want to add to that today before we let people run out?
Yeah, real quick. I started to share this with our group, and Mark and I are right now in discussions with some of the top basketball trainers in the world. They have successful businesses, they have successful followings, and it's about them joining Savvy Basketball. And we have this question for them. It's like, why would you even consider joining us? You're doing great on your own. And their answer is, we don't want to do it alone. We want to be a part of a community. We want to be part of a team. Like, we feel like we've tapped out. We aren't developing. We aren't growing anymore. We need to be in community every single day, getting better with someone else. And that's very exciting for us. And it's honestly why we also partnered with JP for TOC Coach, is we believe that every coach in every athletic department needs that. They need to be around greater minded coaches. They need to be in community. And that's what we are committed to building in TOC Coach. And honestly, we would love every coach in all of your athletic programs to be a part of it. That's what we're trying to build. And we'd love for them to join. It is completely free for them to join. Many of you are already a part of it and are already trying to get your coaches involved. And we would just invite you to both join if you're not already a member of TOC Coach, because maybe you can just drop that link into the chat real quick to TOC Coach. If you're not a member, we'd love you to join. If your coaches are not yet members, we'd love them to join. Completely for free. We'd love to serve them. And if you want us to actually work with every coach in your program, it was interesting talking with our coaches in our breakouts. The minority of the percentage of the athletic directors in our breakout, the minority of the time actually gets to be spent on coach development. The majority of the time of the job was fundraising and leading and hiring. And we get that. We know you can do coach development. We also just know that you don't have the time to do it as much as it's needed. So we would love to come alongside you and help develop your coaches. And if that's of interest to you, we'd love to just set up a one-on-one discovery call to tell you how we could actually do that and serve your coaches. I just dropped the link to a calendar to set up a discovery call. If you're interested in finding out more, how can we actually work directly with the coaches in your program and come alongside you and help them become better coaches and better leaders to develop a better culture that we know that you're fighting every single day for. So this has been really helpful for me. I appreciate you setting it up, JP. And if you want to follow up, we would love to follow up and take you deeper into what we can do to help you as well.
Yeah, we've got a really special group of ADs here. Jerry, Ray are on here. Austin's here. David, Pete. We've got a few others there as well too. All the way from South Africa. We got my boy Daniel. So we got a really special group of ADs. And I'll tell you what, this has been a pleasure to get together with all of you guys every month and just unpack different things, different challenges we're facing, and learning a lot there too. So all of you guys and girls, thanks so much for coming on and being part of this again today. So enjoy your day. The sun is shining in Ireland for like the first time in 47 days. So I got to get outside quick. It literally rained 47 days in a row. So
Must be a good day.
it's a good one.
See you guys. Thank you.
Bye.